Well, Razorback fans, we know that last season you had a phenomenal wide receiver in Andrew Armstrong that really carried the load for you. But will you have anyone even close to that production this upcoming season for the Razorbacks? Let's talk about it on today's Locked On Razorbacks podcast.
You are Locked On Razorbacks, your daily podcast on the Arkansas Razorbacks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. I am your host, John Nabors. I am also the host of Inside Arkansas Live, which you can catch every weekday starting at noon on Inside Arkansas and InsideArkansas.com. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Hope everybody's having a wonderful Tuesday, as we're going to have some things to discuss today. Actually get to hear from Taylen Green as Chris Gordy of Locked On SEC podcast. Had a chance to sit down with him at the Manning camp, so had some interesting things to say about what he's been doing this offseason and also getting ready for year 2 under Petrino. We'll also talk about one of the latest commitments for Arkansas and the changeup that they've had and being able to flip this one particular individual and where they kind of look at right now in the updated 2026 recruiting class rankings. But I wanted to continue on with, kind of where we've been at and discussing, different position groups and where things have been for Razorback football. And specifically, this one comes from the side of things for wide receiver. Now, I talked highly of the quarterback situation with Taylen Green, KJ Jackson, and everything. And I even presented the reasons to believe that there would be a really impactful rushing attack for Arkansas in the running back room because of what we've seen with Braylon Russell, what he could end up being, as well as the committee, and just having a guy like Taylen Green with his legs. You could have an effective rushing attack overall. But now we get to a position, folks, where I'm going to be very frank with you. I'm going to be very honest with you. I am worried about the wide receiver group. Now, it's not to say that this group is bad or that they are not going to be able to be anything at all on the field. There's not any reason to believe that there's not talent, SEC talent, on this particular roster when it comes to the wide receiver position. But considering where you were last year to where you are now, there's a lot of unknown and there's a lot of uncertainty. And as crazy as it is, Arkansas's actually had a pretty good run, if not an electric run, of high-quality wide receivers really under Sam Pittman. You think about Treylon Burks, which we know he was a generational type of athlete. I believe talent-wise, the best wide receiver Arkansas has ever had, and was really just the jack of all trades, can do anything. But even after him, Matt Landers, I thought, was a very, very good wide receiver. Even Jaden Hazelwood had his moments. And then he had Andrew Armstrong, which was a highly regarded kid coming out of the community college that he was at, or Texas A&M Commerce, I guess is what's more what it was. But was here for a couple of seasons and had a huge impact last year. Had 1,000 yards, over 1,000 yards, led the SEC in receptions and receiving yards, and had 1 touchdown catch, which is still just mind-blowing how that is able to work. But still, not only on that, but you had Isaac TeSlaa, who ended up getting drafted into the NFL. You had a guy like Isaiah Satania, who was able to make plays here and there. Nothing as consistent maybe as the other guys, but still, you had a pretty solid group, pretty solid core. And now all of them are gone, essentially. You no longer have any of those guys because either running out of eligibility or hitting the transfer portal, whatever it ends up being. But now it kind of comes into play of like, okay, well, what did you do in the transfer portal? Well, you added a lot. And even on paper, you seem to have added some guys that could really help out. Are they as highly recruited or highly regarded like an Andrew Armstrong once was? Maybe not. But let's just look at the breakdown of who you have in this wide receiver group. You have Courtney Crutchfield, who was the highly regarded. In-state kid from just 2 seasons ago, ended up going to Missouri. He's a 4-star player, goes to Missouri, goes there for 1 year, doesn't really play, but now comes into Arkansas. So you have him. C.J. Brown, a guy that we heard a lot about last spring and even a little bit in fall camp. He's going to be a sophomore. But you have him. You have Raylan Sharp, the transfer from Fresno State, who's going to be a senior. You have Omega Blake, who was, without question, the highest regarded wide receiver. You were able to get out of the transfer portal, and a lot of big things are expected out of him. Cam Shanks, another kid out of UAB. And a lot of it's main for special teams, but he's at that wide receiver position. You have Ismail Cece, kid from Stanford that transferred in. Jalen Brown, kid from Florida State that transferred in. Cross Johnson, Antonio Jordan. Just to name a few. Like, these are guys that names you probably have heard of for whatever reason, but a lot of it just comes with the, hope and potential that's there. And how can I forget Monty Harrison, which was the former baseball player in the major leagues and was technically a freshman last year. And now he's a sophomore. And he's going to be turning 30 here this upcoming football season. That's a real thing. He's going to be turning 30. So that pretty much sums up your wide receiver group. What do you think? I haven't gotten into any stats. I haven't even gotten into any numbers. I haven't gotten into any of that. But to be honest, when I hear all those names, I hear of who? Not in the insulting way. In the way of, I have no idea what any of these guys are going to do. I have no clue. Courtney Crutchfield was a highly regarded kid coming out of Arkansas, and I'm really hopeful that he can find the field and be really good for him. But he didn't really see the field at Missouri as a true freshman, so we don't really know what he's going to be capable of in this offense. Omega Blake, from what I remember in spring ball, I remember Petrino talking about him, and everyone was excited about him, and they were talking about it, but it's kind of like, hey, he's got to learn how to run routes. He's got to learn how to run the routes, and there was a lot of concern there. Felt like Bobby Petrino had some concern there with the wide receiver group in general. And then on top of that, I would say one of the most concerning things for me, and maybe one of those things that I'm very suspect on because it's different. It doesn't mean it's going to be bad, but just because it's different is you don't have size, man. Last few years, you had size at the wide receiver group. Last year, you had Andrew Armstrong, Tyrone Broden, Isaac Tessel. All those guys were 6'3", 6'4", 6'5", and above. Even before that, Matt Landers was a tall wide receiver. Traylon Burks was a tall wide receiver. You had tall targets. Now, you don't really. I mean, Monty Harrison's one of your tallest guys at 6'3". You have Antonio Jordan, the true freshman out of Warren High School, who's 6'6", 230, just an absolute unit. But, I mean, as a true freshman, is he going to play that much? And you got some other guys, too, that are just there at their size, but that doesn't mean that they're going to play. Crutchfield at 6'2", C.J. Brown at 6'1", Raylan Sharp at 5'9", Omega Blake at 6'2", which is nice. Cam Shanks at 5'8", CC at 6 foot, Cross Johnson at 5'10", Jalen Brown 6'1". That's not really showcasing the over-the-top wide receivers that you've had previously. Skill sets can be had a different way, and you can have guys that do a lot better when they have the ball in their hands. I think back to the comparisons that you will always make, or at least that I'll always make when it comes to like Bobby Petrino when he was at Arkansas originally. And he was the head coach. You had two big targets at wide receiver. You had Greg Childs, who was 6'5", and then you had Kobe Hamilton, who was about 6'3". But Joe Adams was 6'0". Jarius Wright, 5'11", 6'0". Marquell Wade, 6'1". Just to name a few of the wide receivers that Bobby Petrino had, that was it. But every so often they'd have a big guy, but they also had more often than not, some smaller guys that were able to do things once they got the ball in their hands and run routes and all of that. So to me, that's where I'm very hopeful for the wide receiver group, is that you have playmakers when the ball is in their hand. The spring did not give me a whole lot of confidence, just considering the comments that Bobby Petrino made and how it's going to be, it didn't feel great about the wide receiver position and how it went and what it looks like or anything like that. Still got a lot of work to do. Still got a lot of work to do on learning how to run routes, learning how to catch the ball. There's things that they can fix in fall camp and really be able to get in that position. But Taylen Green, who we'll talk about in a second, is going to have it all set up to where he's going to have to learn from these guys and get that rapport. And, what is the offense going to look like? It's going to be much different. I mean, it's going to be much different from what it was a year ago, at least in the passing game. There were times where I felt like I couldn't understand why the tight ends weren't utilized enough. There were times last year where I couldn't figure out of why Isaac Tesla was not utilized enough. And knowing Bobby Petrino, who he is as a play caller and an offensive guru, he's not going to just allow and have high-quality, big, talented guys not have the ball in their hands and not be utilized in his offense. So something was off. Something was weird last year. So maybe that you have a bunch of new guys that are Petrino's guys and ones that have been recruited under his staff and everything. Maybe it's going to be a better fit. Maybe it's going to flow a little bit better. Maybe it's the type of wide receivers that Bobby Petrino's been looking for. But the question becomes this: are you going to have an Andrew Armstrong? Are you going to have a wide receiver that has over 1,000 yards? I mean, obviously, leading the SEC in receptions and receiving yards is saying a lot, and it's going to be hard for anybody to do that. But can you have somebody like that to that level? And where it stands right now, I say no. I do. I say no. I just don't see those guys or any of these guys being that type of game-breaking player. And I hope I'm wrong. But that's what's going to be interesting for this offense. Are they going to rely on the speed? Are they going to rely on the agility, the route running? The little pieces of the swing passes and just getting them out to space and, trying to go somewhere that screen passes. Like, is that the thing that they're going to rely on the most? Maybe so. But this could be a very experimental year for the offense in the passing game. And with the wide receivers, I could absolutely see it to where it takes them a little bit to get going and to get their footing down. You can't waste too much time, however, but I could absolutely see that being the case. We're going to talk about Taylen Green, though, and a little comment that he made I thought was pretty interesting from the Manning camp down there in Louisiana. So really fascinating stuff. We'll talk about that, so stay with us here on the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. All right, all you Razorback fans, summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action. Why not make it a little bit more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned over at the beach. When you're using FanDuel, you can track your favorite matchups, and the app keeps it fresh with new daily promotions as well as fun ways to bet. It's easy to use, fast to pay out, and makes even regular season games feel like must-watch events. So if you're new to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today and visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, so moving on into the next segment of the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. So we talked about Taylen Green last week at the quarterback position and why I am a huge fan of his and why I feel like this could be a really interesting year for him, taking on the offense and more of a role in it. I want to say a role, more of the leadership role in it, because last year he kind of got thrown into it, and there's a lot of players around him, like the wide receivers, for instance, that came in a different system, and were looking for different things and different type of offenses when they originally committed, and so there was just a thing of walking into a situation where everybody was new, or you were the new one, and everybody was around for a while there for the past few years. It's got to make things a little bit difficult and a little bit more awkward. So there was that fascination of what he's going to be doing in this next season. But also, I find it really interesting to see and to think about how he's going to approach this offseason in the summertime and what he's truly been working on to make himself better. Because if you look at his numbers and you look at what he's been able to do last season, I mean, the yards were great, but 15 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. Okay. It's not bad, but you got to get those touchdowns up and those interceptions down if you can. 60% of his passes completed. Definitely need to go up on that. But it's just so funny because some people will just be like, well, what do you got to work on in the summer or in the summertime? Well, work on not turning the ball over. Okay. Well, how do you do that? Like, I don't think he's going into every practice just being like, all right, well, I know I'm going to turn the ball over here, here, here. And I do this magic drill that's going to keep me from doing it. Like, there's a whole lot of concepts and there's a whole lot of approaches that he's got to make. Well, either way, he was asked down there at the Manning camp by Chris Gordy of Locked On SEC about this going into the second year under Petrino and what that's like and how that's getting him ready for this next season and how confident he is. And here's what he had to say. Well, as the question asked from Chris Gordy.
Over a year ago, you told us how excited you were to get to work with Coach Petrino. Was it everything you were hoping for? And I got to think another year of continuity, you guys can only build from there, right?
Oh, it's more than what I expect. Every single day, we walk in to a meeting room and it doesn't even feel like I'm in football. I feel like I'm in a classroom. Just learning, just defensive fronts, linebacker alignments, safety rotation, corners, learning why certain plays work for certain coverages and learning checks and just the freedom that he has. Like he trusts me with the offense, and that's something I appreciate and don't take for granted. So I'm always got to make sure I'm on my P's and Q's.
So I really like that response from Taylen Green and just laying it all out there where he feels like he's been in the classroom. So what does that mean? Does that mean the other quarterbacks are not in the classroom or not approaching it like it's a class or training or anything like that? No, I'm not going that far. But what it does tell me is that there is an element of study and there's an element of approaching it and being prepared. I have always felt like, at least in my life, and maybe you feel the same way, that your confidence in something that you're about to do always comes from your preparation. And always comes from your ability to know what to do, how to do it, when to do it, all of those things. And so I am sure that Taylen Green previously, last year, probably got some things done in the classroom, in the training room, in the film room, whatever you want to say. I'm sure he went to that. I'm sure he studied. I'm sure he did all of those things. But this year, it's almost like, all right, you went through that, so let's elevate this. You went through kindergarten. Now let's get you to the first grade. Let's see what you got and let's take it to another level. And now that Taylen Green was able to experience what that offense was like in a year under Petrino, I think he has the foundation laid of what's to be expected, what to do in certain situations, what he's learned from and everything. And now he can approach it of, okay, I got the physical tools. I got this, that. Now I got to understand how to read things. I got to understand how to see things before they happen, looking at defenses, looking at what to expect in certain situations. And then from there, can I really elevate my game? I felt like that was a time where what was also very important for Taylen Green, if there was something that he did struggle with last year, is he did get rattled. There were times he got rattled. And when he got rattled, plays just weren't being made. And when that happens, the offense just fell apart. And I think it goes back to the preparation, the toughness, the mental toughness, the comeback, next get rid of, delete that play and then move on. Let's get to the next one. Those are the things that I'm sure is going to be worked on. So I love the fact that that's what's being worked on. I love the fact that he's approaching it that way with an open mind. And a lot of quarterbacks in this day and age, especially, just want to show up to practice if they even want to do that. It's like, no, I'm just going to run scrimmages and I'll be good. It's like, no, you got to do a lot more than that. You got to put in the work. You got to do this film study. You got to make that happen. So should be fascinating to see, but I'm excited to see what Taylen Green has in store, especially heading into fall camp and where his mindset's going to be at compared to what it was a year ago. Arkansas did get a commitment, a little flipperoo in the 2026 class, and got him from Oklahoma State. We'll talk about him coming up next. So stay with us here on Locked On Razorbacks podcast. All right, so final segment here on the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. So Arkansas was able to get a flip for a commitment for the 2026 class with Victor Lincoln. He was an Oklahoma State commitment, and he's a cornerback, and he's out of Lancaster, Texas, but he has flipped his decision over to the Razorbacks. 6 foot, 165 pounds. He committed to Oklahoma State back in late April, but had an official visit who Arkansas did offer back in 2024 with then assistant coach Darren Wilson. I forgot about him. But new coach Nick Perry joined the efforts this weekend and helped seal the deal, according to 24/7 Sports. So he's excited to be there. I appreciate him and his graphic for spelling WUPIG right with just 2 O's. But he went on to say, I flipped to Arkansas because of the program, relationship with the head coach, the players, and the nutrition center. The defensive scheme that I'm going to be in and how I'm going to thrive in it. It's just all around greatness. They will get a dominant player and a player who's not afraid to compete. So I like the confidence that he has. I like the confidence. He loved his visit, though. He loved the coaches. He loved hanging out with them and everything. So Arkansas is going to have a guy coming in, which, again, all about the commitments here for 2026. But how about that? So Arkansas has got 24 commitments. 24 commitments for the 2026 class. And they're also, depending on who you're looking at, ranked, I think somebody said they were ranked like 13th in the country and 3rd on Rivals in the SEC. I think 24/7 Sports has them ranked at 21. No, it's whatever. But you can't just look at it that way. Folks, we're so far away from signing day. So far away. I mean, December is truly the signing day now, December 15th. It's no longer early signing day. That's just pretty much signing day. So if Arkansas has a number 3 class in the SEC or whatever at that point in time, okay, let's have a conversation. Let's get crazy. But at this early stage, man, that's a lot of commitments for this early part. It makes me interested of, what the approach was. Did it just kind of work out that way? Is this something that Sam Pittman wanted to have? All these kids committed at this point in time? What was the thing about this? What was the approach by this? What was the issue here? And so I just was kind of like, all right, whatever. That works. But still, I give kudos and credit to them getting the work done in the 2026 class. We'll just have to see if it actually plays out the way they hope it does, because December's a long time and a lot of things can change until then. Appreciate each and every one of you listening in and watching into the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or on Google Play. You can also get after me on Twitter at John Nabors Show for any questions, comments, concerns that you may have. Keep it going from there. Same podcast time, same podcast channel tomorrow afternoon. Have a great day, everybody. We'll see you then.